we've seen throughout COVID is all these prejudices have come out, all these pre-decided notions about anti-vaxxers and the vaccine itself, and how good government is, and how bad anybody is who opposes it. And so you get decision makers, both judges and lower decision makers like this, who are abusing summary dismissal to kick out cases that they just politically don't like, as opposed to cases that actually don't have any legal merit. And that's what happened here. It was abused. And I just want to highlight, you've probably heard me say, geez, that's a whole lot of steps to take, and that's a whole lot of procedure rigmarole, and that's exactly it. It is, right? That's a problem. The average person isn't able to go through that on their own, isn't able to afford to hire a lawyer to do it, and so there's no access to justice, right? They're not able to get their benefits. They're not able to properly appeal the denial of their benefits because there's so many steps and all these things that they have to do, right? Amanda just happens to be a person who says, this is important to me, it's a matter of principle, I'm going to hire a lawyer and pay thousands of dollars to make this right. Ultimately, the EI benefit she's going to get if she wins, and I hope she does, is going to be less than what she paid me, right? That's a problem, right? And you saw all across the country, right? The unvaccinated were treated the worst, and they were the most vulnerable, and they were taken advantage of by a government that's become too big and too powerful. And that's exactly what's happened in this case. And I'm so pleased to be a part of this and have Amanda hire me to hold these people accountable, hopefully on behalf of thousands of people who should have got their benefits but didn't.
Tamara Ugolini here with Rebel News to bring you an interview with Alberta-based civil liberties lawyer James Kitchen. Although we often feature cases that Kitchen has worked on by way of crowdfunding efforts, for instance, through Rebel News' Fight the Fines campaign, or through the civil liberty defending organization called Liberty Coalition Canada, today his private practice principled client wants the public to know that pushing back against health fascists, trying to impose indiscriminate and risky medical procedures onto the general population is an important step in ensuring that divisive and unethical policies like vaccine passports never happen again. His client, Amanda Michaud, was terminated from her position as an AHS, Alberta Health Services, employee, and then arbitrarily denied access to the taxpayer-funded social safety net of employment insurance by the federal government for her alleged non-compliance, and then had her appeal dismissed without ever being heard. But her case will now go back to the tribunal, who Kitchen says made fundamental errors in dismissing her claim. And joining me now to discuss this case is Mr. Kitchen himself. Check it out.
So Amanda was an AHS employee, and so like thousands of AHS employees that were unceremoniously put on unpaid leave in the fall of 2021, she was as well. And unpaid leave is the equivalent of being laid off, right? What does unpaid leave mean? You don't have a job, you're not working, and you're not getting paid, right? And so it's the same thing. It's just a fancy term for the same thing. And by the way, before COVID, it was not lawful for your employer to tell you, you're on unpaid leave now, right? We just called that being laid off, and you weren't allowed to do that. Unless you really didn't have any work for the employee. So that's a whole other issue. But so naturally what employees did, because they're intelligent, they thought, well, I've been laid off. This is what EI is for, right? So they went to EI, they applied for their benefits. And whether they were laid off, whether they were put on unpaid leave, or whether they were terminated with cause or terminated without cause, whatever the scenario was, everybody went off to EI thinking, well, this is what I paid into it for. It's for this situation, right? I lost my job due to no fault of my own, so I'm going to get EI. But pretty much universally, EI said, no, you did lose your job because of your own misconduct because you didn't take the shot. So, or you got on unpaid leave because of your own misconduct, in Amanda's case. So she was denied. Now, Amanda eventually went back to work because AHS, decided they would now follow the science or whatever in 2022. So within a few weeks or a few months, most of the AHS workers, or all of them, was recalled. So Amanda was recalled, she went back to work. But she had this period of time that she was on unpaid leave, and she would be entitled to EI benefits during that time if the EI Commission had followed the law. So there's all these steps, of course, right? So she applied for benefits, she was denied. She asked for that to be reconsidered. They said no, the denial was appropriate. Then she appealed that to the General Division of the Social Security Tribunal of Canada. And then they said, look, it's so obvious that you should not get any benefits. It's so obvious that the EI Commission was right that we're not even going to waste our time hearing your case. We're going to summarily dismiss your case as so obviously unmeritorious. There's just no way you could get benefits, right? So then she has that summary dismissal, okay? At that point, she hires me. We appeal that to the appeal division of the Social Security Tribunal, and we say, look, this summary dismissal was wrong. You need to kick it back to them and tell them to actually have a hearing, right? So when we get to the appeal division, and the EI Commission agrees with us, they say to the appeal division, yes, you know what? They're right. It shouldn't have been summarily dismissed. So I guess we should have a new hearing now. So that's where we're at. The appeal division has kicked it back to the general division for us to have a real hearing.
And
I
just want to highlight in that appeal, there was a couple main points that you stated that I guess, are they called an adjudicator? Member Shaw ruled on that were factual error and so on and so forth. And one of those things was the dismissal of the appeal in contravention of natural justice. Can you elaborate on what you mean by that?
Well, one of the biggest aspects of natural justice is that you have a right to have your case heard, fully decided, right? In other words, it should not be pre-decided or prejudged and kicked out before the decision maker has even heard the arguments or heard the evidence. And that's what happened, right? When you have a case summarily dismissed, the decision maker is saying, I already know the way this case will go. I've prejudged it. I don't need to waste my time. I can just decide without even hearing what you have to say, right? And there is a limited role for that in the law, because sometimes people do actually waste other people's times by bringing frivolous lawsuits. That's a thing. It happens. But what we've seen throughout COVID is all these prejudices have come out. All these pre-decided notions about anti-vaxxers and the vaccine itself, and how good government is, and how bad anybody is who opposes it. And so you get decision makers, both judges and lower decision makers like this, who are abusing summary dismissal to kick out cases that they just politically don't like, as opposed to cases that actually don't have any legal merit. And that's what happened here. It was abused. And I just want to highlight, you've probably heard me say, geez, that's a whole lot of steps to take, and that's a whole lot of procedure rigmarole, and that's exactly it. It is, right? That's a problem. The average person isn't able to go through that on their own, isn't able to afford to hire a lawyer to do it, and so there's no access to justice, right? They're not able to get their benefits. They're not able to properly appeal the denial of their benefits because there's so many steps and all these things that they have to do, right? Amanda just happens to be a person who says, this is important to me, it's a matter of principle, I'm going to hire a lawyer and pay thousands of dollars to make this right. Ultimately, the EI benefit she's going to get if she wins, and I hope she does, is going to be less than what she paid me, right? That's a problem, right? And we saw all across the country, right? The unvaccinated were treated the worst, and they were the most vulnerable, and they were taken advantage of by a government that's become too big and too powerful. And that's exactly what's happened in this case. And I'm so pleased to be a part of this and have Amanda hire me to hold these people accountable, hopefully on behalf of thousands of people who should have got their benefits but didn't.
Well, and that's kind of the precedence that the other case we previously discussed, which is still in the appeal process, if I remember correctly, will be able to set for all of those other Canadians who could hopefully then go back and say, hey, I would like the benefits that I've paid into for my entire working life too, right? Like we don't have a choice whether or not we pay into this social safety net. We're forced to pay into it, and it's supposed to be there for our use and at our disposal at times of crisis when we need it most. And we've seen that it just failed during the COVID hysteria.
Yeah, so many of our ideals failed, right? And it's the same thing with the unions too, right? Thousands and thousands of people who have paid into these dues, they're forced to, and the unions just, and it's the same thing with Amanda, right? She's part of a union, right? They didn't do anything for her when she was put on unpaid leave, right? So, she was left trying to get EI benefits because it's not like she could get anything through her union. It's the same problem. And it shouldn't happen, and it's a real shame. And I'm really hopeful now that we have a real hearing at the General Division, that we're gonna set this right, because I'm only aware of one other General Division decision where the adjudicator, the decision maker, actually found in favor of the claimant and said, yeah, you should have got your EI benefits. You exercised your right to not get vaccinated. You didn't lose your job because of your own misconduct. You should have got your benefits. So here you go. So I'm hoping to build on that and create another precedent and fix this problem.
And also perhaps hold this member Shaw, the person who decided to dismiss the appeal altogether without hearing any of the merits, hold their feet to the fire on this, because a big part of this, when I was reading through the motion to appeal, she conflated the use of suspension with what actually happened, which was a leave of absence. And so if there aren't checks and balances like the ability to hire a lawyer like yourself to make those clarifications and point out those factual errors, then what's left for the lay Canadian?
I know. That's just it. They're at the mercy of people who don't really care about the law, who have a serious disregard for the facts, who really only seem to care about their political agenda and their pre-decided opinions. And that's a scary thing. And the rule of law is such a delicate, fragile thing because it really does depend on a whole bunch of individuals individually saying, I'm going to be ethical, I'm going to do what's right, I'm going to follow the evidence where it leads, I'm going to apply the law, and be damned if I'm unpopular or I do something that's against the government, or if I'm a dissenting voice or whatever, or if I go against the elites, or my colleagues think I'm weird. That's the whole rule of law is literally predicated on each individual saying, I'm going to be a decent human being and do what's right, come what may. I don't think we actually think enough about that, right? That's like, all these systems, no matter how great they are, they all ultimately depend on individual human beings being somewhat moral in their daily lives. And if they're not, goodbye, decent society.
Now, just in closing, thanks for taking time out of your day to explain this case and discuss it. What's the time frame on something like this? I'm always about the time frames, and I know that the wheels of justice are slow turning, and even more so over the last 3 years. But when can we expect to hear an update?
Well, I'm waiting to hear back from the General Division as to when they're going to set a date for a hearing. I really don't know. I was called just yesterday when they asked me what format I wanted for the hearing. So I'm hopeful that I'm going to get a hearing sometime this summer, and then we get a decision sometime in the fall. I'm hopeful for that. We'll see, because things do move slow, unfortunately. But I'm thinking we're going to have a decision from the General Division before the end of the year.
As always, you can subscribe to Rebel News at rebelnews.com and follow us for updates as they come in. For Rebel News, I'm Tamara Ugolini. The unjust denial Canadians faced by their employers for making medical decisions that ran contrary to the medical industrial complex has been a key issue that Rebel News has followed for the last few years, but that is being put at risk by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's censorship plans. To find out what Rebel News is doing about this, please head over to stopc11.com. If you're passionate about free speech, then you can chip in a few dollars there to help offset the costs of constitutional litigation. All of that and more at stopc11.com.